I hadn't planned on staying late that evening. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just dropping by Ryan's place to hang out, maybe grab dinner, and call a night. But the moment the door opened and Clara greeted me, something in the air shifted. She stood there in the soft, amber glow of the porch light, wearing a simple cream-colored linen dress that flowed gently to her knees. Her hair was loosely tied back, a few strands falling free, catching the faint breeze. There was something about the way she carried herself, not trying to be striking, but somehow effortlessly graceful. "Ethan," she said warmly, stepping aside to let me in. "It's been a while. Ryan's upstairs finishing a call, but come in, please." Her voice had that calm, low tone, the kind that makes you instinctively lean in, even when you hear her perfectly well. The faint scent of lavender and something sweet, maybe vanilla, drifted around her, and I realized I was already paying too much attention to details I shouldn't. Inside, the house felt cozy in a way mine never did. Soft lamps lit the corners instead of harsh ceiling lights. A faint, almost nostalgic melody played from a speaker somewhere, just loud enough to notice if you listen closely. As I set my bag down, Clara glanced toward the stairs and sighed with a small, knowing smile. "He'll be a while," she said, tilting her head toward Ryan's room. "I swear, every time his friends call, the rest of the world disappears." I chuckled. "Sound about right. Should I wait in the living room?" "Please," she said, gesturing toward the couch. Then, after a pause, if you're not in a rush later, maybe stay a little longer tonight. Ryan invited a few friends, but once they start gaming, I usually get abandoned. I hesitated, sensing something unspoken beneath the casual tone. "Sure," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I don't mind." She smiled, a small but genuine curve of her lips, and for a moment, her gaze lingered a fraction too long before she turned away. I settled on the couch, letting my eyes wander. The room felt lived in, layered with little touches of her personality. Neatly stacked books on the side table, a soft throw blanket draped over the armrest, framed photographs catching the light. From the kitchen, I heard the gentle clink of glass against marble and a low hum of her voice as she hummed along to the music. There was something strangely calming about the sound, and yet it made me more aware of the quiet between us. I wasn't sure why, but the evening already felt different, like something unsaid was slowly unfolding. And though I couldn't name it yet, I felt it in the way her voice softened when she spoke, the way her presence filled the room, and the way time seemed to slow just a little when she was near. Ryan had barely been home 10 minutes before disappearing upstairs with his headset, lost in some online game with his friends. The muffled shouts and laughter from above faded into the background, leaving the lower floor wrapped in a hush of warm lamplight and soft music. I sat in the living room, idly scrolling through my phone, when Clara stepped in from the kitchen holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "You look bored," she said with a faint smile, tilting the bottle slightly, as if an invitation. "Keep me company?" I hesitated just for a second. "Wine? You sure? I promise not to tell your mother," she teased softly, and there was a sparkle in her eyes that didn't feel rehearsed. I laughed, nodding, and watched as she worked the corkscrew with an ease that suggested she'd done this 100 times before. The gentle pop of the cork seemed to echo in the quiet room. She poured slowly, the deep crimson liquid catching the light, swirling lazily as it filled the glass. "Not too much," I murmured. "Relax, Ethan," she said, her tone warm, her smile playful. "It's just a glass or 2. I took my glass carefully, the cool stem pressing against my fingertips. For a moment, I noticed how close she'd chosen to sit. Not next to me, but not far either. Just close enough that when I leaned back, the soft brush of her shoulder was a possibility. She curled one leg beneath her, settling into the couch with the kind of comfort that came from owning the space completely. "So," she began, swirling her glass lightly, "how's work treating you?" I shrugged, taking a sip. "Busy. Draining, most days. She studied me quietly over the rim of her glass. You sound older than 24 when you say that. Her words lingered in the air, not just casual observation, but something else. Maybe admiration. Maybe understanding. We talked about everything and nothing. Music, movies, little regrets. At one point, I made a sarcastic comment about my job, and she laughed. Really laughed to sound soft and unguarded. It struck me how different she was when Ryan wasn't around. With him, she always seemed poised, composed, the gentle but firm mom who had everything under control. But now, she was looser, warmer, almost playful in a way that made the air feel lighter. I found myself watching her more closely than I should. The way she tilted her head when she listened, the faint crinkle near her eyes when she smiled, the soft rhythm of her fingertips tapping against the glass. Between us, there was nothing inappropriate. Nothing said, nothing done. And yet, the quiet between our words carried a different weight than it had before, something unspoken, fragile, and impossible to ignore. Upstairs, Ryan laughed loudly at something in his game. Down here, the night was slowly becoming ours. Do you want me to expand part 3 next, where Clara opens up emotionally, revealing her vulnerability, in the same 500-word, slow burn style? This is where the emotional intimacy really begins to deepen. Should I? The second glass of wine had a way of softening the edges of the night. The music played low in the background, some mellow tune with a distant piano, filling the silence without intruding on it. Clara sat with one knee tucked beneath her, her glass cradled loosely between her fingers. Her posture had relaxed, shoulders slightly slouched, head tilted back against the couch, but her gaze was somewhere far away. You know, she said softly, almost as if she was speaking to herself, sometimes I wonder when life slowed down like this. I turned toward her, the weight in her voice pulling my attention fully. What do you mean? She exhaled a small, quiet laugh, not amused but wistful. When Ryan was little, everything was loud, messy, chaotic in a way I didn't always appreciate at the time. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass absent-mindedly, making a faint, high-pitched ring. Back then, every day felt like it was rushing forward. Now, she paused, staring into the deep red swirl of wine. Now it feels like life's just passing by, and I'm standing still, watching it. There was no drama in her words, no forced sadness, just an honest, unguarded moment. I hesitated before speaking, careful with my tone. You don't seem stuck, at least not to me. Her lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes stayed distant. That's because I've gotten good at hiding it. The admission hung between us, delicate and heavy all at once. For a while, we just sat there, letting the silence breathe. The muted hum of Ryan's laughter upstairs drifted faintly through the ceiling, grounding us in reality, even as the space between us felt increasingly separate from it. She shifted slightly, turning her body more toward me. I don't really talk about this stuff, she admitted. Not with Ryan. Not with anyone, really. He thinks I'm strong. Always fine. Always in control. I nodded, keeping my voice low. Maybe you don't have to be strong all the time. Her gaze flicked up then, meeting mine directly for the first time in what felt like minutes. There was something vulnerable in her expression, like she was letting me see a part of her carefully guarded away from the world. You remind me of him sometimes, she whispered after a beat. Your father. He used to listen like this. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just stayed there, present, listening. And maybe that's why her voice softened when she spoke next. It's nice, she murmured, more to herself than to me. Having someone just sit with you. I nodded again, quietly, feeling the weight of the moment settle over us. Upstairs, the game chatter continued, oblivious. Down here, the night slowed, wrapping us in a fragile kind of stillness, one I didn't dare break. The night had settled into an easy rhythm, soft voices, slow music, and the quiet hum of an unspoken connection. I'd lost track of time, but the faint vibration of Ryan's laughter upstairs reminded me he was still there, still oblivious, while the world down here had shifted into something entirely our own. Clara leaned forward slightly, reaching for the wine bottle on the coffee table. I instinctively moved to grab it too, and for the briefest moment, our fingers brushed. It should have been nothing. It should have passed without a second thought. But it didn't. Her hand lingered against mine, just for a heartbeat, before she curled her fingers around the bottle. She didn't apologize, didn't draw attention to it, but when she poured the wine, I noticed the smallest tremor in her wrist, like she'd felt it too. She slid the glass toward me, her eyes staying on mine for half a second longer than necessary. "Careful," she said softly, her voice almost playful. "This one's stronger than it tastes." I smiled faintly. "I'll take my chances." We talked less now, though not because we'd run out of things to say. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was charged, dense in a way I couldn't quite name. A soft song came on, something older, timeless, threaded with low strings and a lingering piano. Clara's lips curved into a nostalgic smile. "I used to dance to this," she murmured, almost to herself. "Ich glänzte her." "You still could." She laughed, shaking her head, strands of loose hair falling against her cheek. "Not without embarrassing myself." "You wouldn't," I said before I could stop myself. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The words hung there, fragile and suspended, until she reached up, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. My eyes followed the motion, and I hated that they did, but I couldn't help it. Her knee brushed mine, just barely, as she shifted her position on the couch. It might have been an accident. It probably was. But neither of us moved. I became acutely aware of everything. The warmth radiating from her body, the faint lavender note of her perfume, the distant hum of Ryan's game chatter upstairs, and the soft creak of the couch beneath us. Clara took a slow sip of wine, her gaze lowering to the glass, and I caught the faintest smile pulling at the corner of her lips. Neither of us acknowledged the change, but we both felt it, the electric quiet settling between us, the way the air seemed heavier, closer somehow. It wasn't anything, and yet it was everything. For the first time that night, I wondered if staying later than planned had been a choice at all, or if the night itself had been leading us here all along. By the time I finally glanced at the clock, it was well past midnight. The rest of the house was quiet, save for the muffled bursts of laughter from Ryan's room upstairs. Down here, though, time felt slower, as though the world outside had faded and the night existed only for the two of us. Clara leaned back into the couch, her wine glass resting loosely between her fingers. The warm lamplight softened the lines of her face, turning her features almost ethereal, delicate, calm, but with something unspoken lingering beneath her expression. She set her empty glass down carefully, her fingertips resting on the stem a moment longer than needed. "It's late," she murmured, glancing at the clock as if just realizing how much time had slipped away. I hesitated, unsure whether I should stand, unsure if I even wanted to. "Yeah," I said softly, leaning forward to place my own glass on the table. "I should probably stay a little longer," she said suddenly, almost cutting me off. Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it, a trace of need, subtle yet impossible to miss. I swallowed, leaning back slowly. "All right." For a moment, we didn't speak. The only sound was the distant hum of the music and the soft click of the air conditioner cycling on. And then Clara leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice, as though confiding something forbidden. "Don't tell Ryan we stayed up this late," she whispered, her tone light but laced with meaning. "Tonight's just different." Her words hung between us, delicate but heavy, carrying more weight than they seemed on the surface. I nodded, my voice steady but quiet. "Our secret." The smallest smile curved her lips, the kind that revealed nothing and everything at once. Her gaze lingered on me, holding mine just long enough to make my pulse quicken, and then she looked away, taking a slow breath as if to steady herself. I noticed then how close we were sitting. The couch that had felt so spacious earlier suddenly felt narrow, intimate. Her shoulder was only inches from mine, and the faint warmth radiating from her skin seemed to reach me without touch. I thought of standing, of breaking the spell, but instead, I found myself memorizing the details. The curve of her jaw in the soft light, the way her thumb absent-mindedly traced the rim of her empty glass, the faint lavender scent that clung to the air around her. The silence wasn't awkward. It was something else entirely, a fragile stillness neither of us dared disturb. When she finally stood, gathering the glasses, she glanced back at me and spoke barely above a whisper. Some nights are better kept between us. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The look I gave her said everything. And just like that, the night became ours alone. The clock on the wall ticked softly, its sound filling the quiet house, as if even time was holding its breath. It was close to 1 a.m. now, and somewhere upstairs, Ryan had finally gone silent, the muffled game chatter replaced by stillness. I stood near the front door, keys in hand, but somehow I didn't feel ready to leave. The weight of the night hung in the air, delicate, fragile, like a spun thread that might break if either of us moved too quickly. Clara walked me to the hallway, carrying the empty wine glasses in one hand. She moved slowly, almost absent-mindedly, as though she too was reluctant to let the night end. When she stopped by the kitchen doorway, she placed the glasses gently on the counter, her fingers resting on one rim for a moment longer than necessary before she turned back to me. The hallway light was dim, its glow soft and golden, washing over her face and catching strands of hair that had slipped loose from her bun. There was a faint crease at the corner of her mouth, not sadness exactly, but a kind of quiet thoughtfulness. She hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. Tonight doesn't leave this house. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't even a request. It was something softer, a fragile wish wrapped in unspoken meaning. I nodded, meeting her gaze steadily. Our secret forever. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things we weren't saying, of glances that lasted half a beat too long, of the quiet understanding that tonight had changed something neither of us fully named. Claire stepped closer, just slightly, until she was standing within reach. She raised a hand to smooth an invisible crease from my shirt collar, her fingertips brushing lightly against the fabric. The touch was brief, almost nothing, but I felt it everywhere. You should get some rest, she said softly, her hand lingering for just a moment before dropping back to her side. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. You too. For a second, it seemed like she might say something more, but instead, she only nodded and stepped back, giving me space to leave. As I opened the door, the night air outside hit me, cooler, sharper, almost startling after the warmth of her home. I paused on the threshold, glancing back just once. Clara stood in the hallway, leaning lightly against the doorframe, her arms folded loosely across her chest. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held something I couldn't mistake. Something unspoken. Something ours alone. I stepped out into the quiet street, the door closing softly behind me, carrying with me the weight of the night and the promise of a secret I already knew I'd never break. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my bedroom curtains, soft and golden, but my thoughts were still tangled somewhere in last night. Sleep hadn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed little fragments. The laughter, the quiet pauses, the weight of her gaze when she whispered, asterisk, tonight doesn't leave this house. Asterisk by late morning, Ryan texted, insisting I come over for breakfast. He claimed Clara was making pancakes, like she always did on weekends, and I almost declined. But something in me, something I couldn't quite name, made me grab my keys anyway. When I stepped into their house, it felt almost unreal how normal everything seemed. The living room was exactly as we'd left it, except for the faint smell of brewed coffee replacing last night's wine. The sunlight pouring through the windows made the space look brighter, cleaner, as though the previous night had been nothing more than a passing dream. Clara was in the kitchen, moving between the stove and the counter with effortless grace, her hair tied up neatly now, her dress replaced with a soft gray sweater and dark jeans. If last night had left any trace on her, she didn't show it. Not outwardly, anyway. She looked up as I entered and greeted me with the same warm, practiced smile she'd used 100 times before. "Morning, Ethan," she said softly, flipping a pancake with casual ease. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound equally casual, but my voice carried a little more weight than I intended. Ryan came bounding down the stairs, half distracted by something on his phone, oblivious to the undercurrent that hung between his mother and me. "Finally," he said, grinning. "I thought you'd overslept." I laughed, forcing my voice into something light and natural. "Just moving slow today." We sat around the kitchen table, and for the most part, everything felt normal. Ryan talked endlessly about his game, his friends, and his weekend plans, while I nodded at all the right places. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Every now and then, Clara's gaze would meet mine. Fleeting, unspoken, like the quick flicker of a candle in a room full of shadows. Nothing in her expression gave anything away, but the connection was there, quiet and undeniable. At one point, as she placed the coffee pot on the table, her hand brushed against mine, so briefly, so lightly, it could have been accidental. But when I glanced up, I caught the faintest curve at the corner of her lips, a tiny acknowledgement meant only for me. Ryan never noticed. He didn't need to. We carried on, eating pancakes and drinking coffee like any other Saturday morning. But beneath the easy conversation, there was something permanent now, a shared memory, a quiet understanding, a secret woven into the fabric of an ordinary day. Some things didn't need to be spoken. Some things simply belonged to the night. And as I left later that morning, Clara passed behind me in the hallway. She didn't say a word, just let her fingertips lightly graze my hand for the briefest second. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I already knew. Last night belonged to us, and our secret would stay that way.